Hey there, welcome. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at some vocabulary for the topic of roles and responsibilities. So you might not have heard of this topic before, but it is very useful for both the speaking test and the writing test. And in today's video, we're going to look at 20 advanced words and phrases to help you get a better score in your upcoming IELTS test. And the first word we're going to look at is this. To donate. So this is a verb and it means to give something without wanting anything in exchange. Now be careful with the pronunciation. It's donate. So the stress is on the second syllable. I often hear people saying donate. So they put the stress on the first syllable. But donate, stress is on the second syllable. Donate. Try saying it yourself. One way that celebrities can help charitable causes is to donate money. Okay, one way celebrities can help charitable causes is to donate money. Okay, so we can donate money, we can also donate blood, funds being money as well. We can donate time and we can donate proceeds. So if we raise money for charity, we donate the proceeds to the charity. Now, here are the prepositions we use. We donate to someone and a donation by someone. So it was donated by Steve Jobs. It was donated to the people of Apple, for example. So donate to someone, donate by the giver. Okay, we also have another part of speech. We have donation, which is the countable noun form. Reputable charities spend most of their donations on aid and a small fraction on administration. Okay, so here's an example question that uses the word donate. Why do you think some people like to donate things to charity? So you could get this question in part 1 of the speaking test. You could also get this question in part 3 of the speaking test. Here is how I would answer. I think it makes them feel good. When we donate books, clothing, or even money to charity, we have the notion that our actions are making the world a better place, and that's a very positive feeling. I think people feel especially fulfilled when they are donating to a charity that they feel strongly about. For example, people will often donate to charities that fund research into particular diseases or help a particular group of people in need. Okay, I want to show you some things about this answer. This answer follows a structure called the REE method. So REE stands for respond, elaborate, example. And let me show you how this answer uses the REE method. We start with a very short response. So this is typical. We can say something like yes, no, or not all the time. So a short response. Then afterwards, what we're going to do is we're going to elaborate on our answer. And you can see this section here in blue. So we give a longer elaboration. And then finally at the end, we have an example. So, for example, people often donate to charities that fund research into particular diseases, etc., etc. So we respond, we elaborate, and we give an example. And by doing this, we're going to get a higher score for fluency and coherence. And this is, again, something that you can do in your speaking, especially in part 3, and you can also do in your writing as well. So respond, elaborate, example. I also want to point out some of the vocabulary that I've used in this answer. So we have phrases like have the notion. That's just a sophisticated way of saying people think. So people think that our actions are making the world a better place. And instead of saying think, I have people, or we have the notion. Have the notion means to think. We have the notion that our actions are making the world a better place. We also have this nice word fulfilled. So fulfilled is like a synonym for satisfied. It makes us feel good. We also have this, to feel strongly about something. So this is a collocation. If you feel strongly about something, it means it is important. Lots of people feel strongly about climate change. Other people feel strongly about animal rights. So feel strongly about something. A good collocation, and using these kinds of collocations will mean that you get a higher score in your IELTS test. We've also got this word, to fund. So if you fund research, it means you give money for research. So to fund something. Fund research into particular diseases or help a particular group of people in need. So people in need is people that maybe are poor or they require assistance or help in some way. So people in need is a very good synonym for poor people or people that need assistance. And using phrases like people in need can help us to get a higher score in our IELTS. Okay, let's look at the next word. And that is to rely on someone or rely on something. This is a phrasal verb. It means to depend on or trust someone or something. A bit like this man walking below me, he relies on his partner or he relies on his walking sticks to help him walk. Okay, pronunciation. Rely on something. Okay, rely on something. Rely on someone. Rely on someone. Many unemployed people rely on government benefits. Repeat after me. Many unemployed people rely on government benefits. Okay, so you hear rely on someone, rely on something. We can also rely upon someone or rely upon something. Should primary students be allowed to use calculators in math class? Again, maybe part 1 question, but quite likely to come up in part 3 of the speaking test. Here's how I would answer. Well, I can't really think why not. Calculators are very useful as they allow us to quickly work out difficult maths problems. Saying that it might be important that children learn how to do mental arithmetic first. If they learn how to use a calculator too early on, they might never develop the ability to do sums in their head and they'll always have to rely on using a calculator. I guess it's a good idea to teach primary students how to use a calculator, but in a way that doesn't make them too reliant on always having one at hand. Okay, so I'm going to point out some things about this answer. Do you notice that I change my answer? I change my opinion. At the beginning I say, well, I can't really think why not. And then I start to go down that route. I say why I think calculators should be taught and should be used in primary school. And then afterwards I say, saying that, so I'm reflecting on what I've said and I'm changing my opinion. And you can do this in the IELTS test. You don't have to stick rigidly to what you say at the beginning. In fact, if you use a phrase like saying that and you change your opinion, you're showing a higher level of fluency, which means a higher IELTS speaking score. Okay, we've also got lots of good topic-specific vocabulary, so things like work out a difficult maths problem. So that means to solve a difficult maths problem. We've got mental arithmetic, so that's maths that you do in your head. We've got do sums in their head. So again, that's the same as mental arithmetic. I'm using synonyms, which again shows more advanced vocabulary. We've also got this, rely on using a calculator. So rely on, a very useful phrasal verb that we're learning today. We've also got this, to reliant on. So we have rely on and to be reliant on. So first we use the phrasal verb and then we have the adjective. And then we also have this, at hand. So if something is at hand, it means that you have it on you. So for example, I have my mobile at hand. I have it in my hand. I can use it very easily. Okay, the next word is to boycott. Boycott. So to boycott something. To refuse to buy a product or take part in an activity as a way of expressing strong disapproval. So the little minions below me are trying to boycott fur, so animal skin. They say, don't use fur. Boycott companies that use fur in their clothing. Pronunciation, boycott, boycott. So stress is on the first syllable. Repeat after me. Pressure groups urged consumers to boycott clothing brands made using child labor. Okay. Do you think it's a good idea to boycott brands that you don't agree with? Okay, this would be considered to be a very difficult part 3 question of the speaking test. Here's how I would answer. Yes, I think it's a great idea. How you spend your money is a good way to show support or condemnation for a company. It sends a clear signal to companies that you don't agree with their business practices, and ideally, it will hurt their profits. If the boycott is big enough, board members or shareholders will take notice and companies may change the way they operate. History has shown that there have been a number of successful boycotts of companies, including Nestle and The Body Shop. Okay, again, we've got an example of the REE method. Can you remember, what does REE method stand for? The first R is respond. The E, elaborate. And the final E, example. So we've got the response at the beginning, a short response. We've got a longer elaboration, and then we finish with an example. So in this case, an example of a successful boycott of Nestle and The Body Shop, 2 very large and controversial companies. Okay, let's look at some of the vocabulary that we have here. I've got my short response. I say, yes, I think it's a great idea. Okay, so we like short responses to big questions, and then we like longer elaborations. We've also got this condemnation. Condemnation. So that's the opposite of support. So you can support a company or you can show condemnation. So it means that you disagree to a very large extent with that company. We say it sends a clear signal. So if you send a clear signal, you're making it very clear what your belief or what your opinion is. You send a clear signal to the company. If you don't buy their products and the company sees their profits going down, it sends a clear signal that consumers are not happy. We've also got this phrase, hurt their profits. So the profit is the amount of money that a company makes, and we can hurt their profits, which means that we lower their profits. Board members or shareholders. So often very large companies have a board of trustees, so people that look out for the company and make decisions, high-level decisions about the company. And shareholders are people who typically hold a lot of shares and stock in that company. So these people are very interested in that company getting lots of profits because it makes them richer. So if you boycott them, then the shareholders and board members are going to take notice. So take notice is another way to say that they realize something. They take notice. Right, so we had condemnation, and can you remember, condemnation was the opposite of support. So to agree or give encouragement to someone or something because you want them to succeed. Okay, where is the stress? Support. Support. The stress is on the second syllable. Support. Support. It is important to support local businesses by buying locally. Okay, again, it is important to support local businesses by buying locally. Okay, so we've got lots of different collocations with support. We've got adverbs with support, like enthusiastically support, fully support, strongly support, actively support. And here's one I like, wholeheartedly support, which means you support something with your entire heart. It means you fully support something. We also have verbs with support, so things like attract support, gain support, receive support, give support. We also have different parts of speech. So in this case, we're using support as a verb, but you can also use it as a noun. So here's an example. Should celebrities publicly show support for charities or organizations? So support can be a verb, it can also be used as a noun. Let's see a question using the word support. How can the government support homeless people? Okay, so you could get this in the writing test in task 2, you could get this in the speaking test in part 3. Here's how I would answer. Well, I guess there are a few different ways to help homeless people. First of all, they can provide free shelter for people, places to spend the night, shower and eat. On top of that, they can employ support workers and recruit volunteers to help those in need. Finally, they can provide help and guidance to help homeless people afford their own place. Okay, I want to point out the structure of this answer. I start with, well, I guess there are a few different ways. So I'm introducing my answer, and then afterwards I have, first of all, and then I have my first reason, or my first way, and then I have on top of that, and then I have my second way, and then finally, and then I introduce my third way. So we can use these, they're called discourse markers, to organize our speech, and that helps us to get a higher score for fluency and coherence. So I could say, well, I guess there are 3 ways that the government can support homeless people. First of all, da-da-da-da. Secondly, da-da-da. Thirdly, da-da-da-da. Now, if you're going to say how many ways there are to help, I would always suggest that you say 2 ways. Because what I see very regularly is students saying, there are 3 ways to help homeless people. First of all, blah, 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 and they have a great answer. Second of all, blah, 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 and they have a great answer. And then they're trying to think of their third way, and they can't think of one. It's much easier to think of 2 reasons or 2 ways than to think of 3. So just say something like, there are a few different ways, or there are 2 different ways, and that'll put less pressure on you to think of too many ideas. The next word is endorse. This guy below me endorses English pro tips. What do you think it means? Okay, so to endorse means to make a public statement of your approval or support for something or someone. So pronunciation, endorse, endorse. Stress is on the second syllable, endorse. When celebrities endorse particular charities, these organizations often receive a lot of public attention. When celebrities endorse particular charities, these organizations often receive a lot of public attention. So we could have endorse plus a noun, so endorse a plan, endorse a proposal, endorse a decision, or endorse a product. And we can have the noun form, which is endorsement. Business owners pay a lot of money for celebrity endorsement, which means business owners, CEOs and people that have founded their own company pay a lot of money for celebrities to promote, so to publicly promote their products. Okay, now why do you think companies pay a lot of money for celebrities to endorse their products? Good question. I've always wondered why that was. I imagine one of the main reasons is that they understand that celebrities are followed and admired by a lot of people. And if they want their products to be seen favorably, they'll pay a celebrity to publicly promote and show support for their products. I guess one of the reasons they have to pay so much is that celebrities are already usually pretty wealthy and aware of the importance of their public image, so they'll ask for a lot of money in order to endorse those products and companies. Okay, I start with, good question. I've always wondered why that was. Now you notice I say, good question. I don't say, that is a good question, or that is an interesting question. That's something that I've noticed. Higher level students and native speakers tend to just say, good question, or interesting question, or tricky question. Lower level students say, that's a good question, or that's an interesting question. So sound more fluent and confident and just say, good question. Don't say, that's a good question. Okay, I say, I imagine one of the main reasons is, and then I give my answer. So again, this is a discourse marker to introduce my main reason. I've also got phrases like this, to publicly promote and show support for their products. So this is the kind of language chunk that's going to help me to get a higher score in the speaking test. Publicly promote means to, in front of the public, promote a particular product, and support for a product is the same. It's to promote and to show that this is a product that you think is a good thing. I've got this word wealthy. So this is a common word and it's a synonym for rich. So you can say rich, you can say wealthy, you could also say affluent. aware of the importance of their public image. So if you're aware of something, it means that you know that something is important. So celebrities are aware of the importance of their public image. They know that their public image is important. So they need to be very careful about the kind of products they support or they endorse. Let's go on to the next word. The next word is fund, which we saw earlier. Can you remember what it means? It means to provide the money to pay for an event, activity, or organization. The pronunciation is fund. Fund. The government should fund infrastructure projects in poor areas. So we could have an adverb and fund, so publicly fund or privately fund. If you publicly fund something, then it's the government that pays. If you privately fund something, then it's companies or individuals that pay for something. We could have a fund plus a noun, so fund an activity, fund an operation, a project, and we also have verbs with fund, like raise funds, receive funds, provide funds, or use funds. Now we could also use fund as a noun. The National Fund pays for welfare benefits such as unemployment and sickness. And we have a very common word, funding, which is also a noun. Charities often receive funding, so funding meaning money here, from celebrities and wealthy business owners. Let's continue. Here's a question that appeared in the writing test rather recently. Who should fund scientific research into new medicine? Oof. Tough question. Ultimately, I reckon it's good for the government and non-profit organisations to fund the majority of research into new medicine. The main reason for this is that these organisations don't have so much of an incentive to sell the medicine or treatment for exorbitant amounts. The problem is that very often when businesses own the intellectual property for scientific research, they'll try to make as much profit from it as possible. This often means that the medicine or treatment will be prohibitively expensive for the people that need it, but don't have the financial means to afford it. Okay, so remember earlier, instead of starting with, that's a good question, I just said, good question. Well, here I do the same. I don't say, that's a tough question. I just say, tough question. Okay, and then the important thing is I don't go, tough question, next. I say, tough question, and then I try and answer anyway. Ultimately, I reckon. So that's like a way of saying, in conclusion, I think. Or on balance, I think. Or taking everything into account, I think. So ultimately, I reckon. So ultimately is like in conclusion, and I reckon is like I think. It's just a more advanced way to say it. We've got this word to fund, so it means to provide the money for the research. And then we have exorbitant amounts. So exorbitant amounts means lots and lots and lots and lots of money. So if private companies try and sell the medicine or treatment that they've developed, they'll sell it for exorbitant amounts. They'll sell it for a lot of money, but maybe the government won't. We also have this phrase, intellectual property. So you can have physical property, like your home, your car, other objects in your house that you own, but you can also have intellectual property, which is how you own your ideas. So when a company comes up with an idea for a product or for a way of working, that is their intellectual property. They can own that idea. So owning an idea is intellectual property. Now we also have prohibitively expensive, which means extremely expensive. A little bit like exorbitant amounts that you saw earlier. We've got have the financial means. So to have the financial means that you have enough money to do something. To have the financial means. For example, some parents hope that they have the financial means to pay for their children's university education. To have the financial means to pay for something means to have enough money to be able to pay for that thing. All right. The next word is affluent. Now we came across that earlier. Can you remember what it means? Or maybe you know what it means already. It means having a lot of money or possessions. So affluent is a synonym for rich or wealthy. Now the pronunciation is affluent. Stress is on the first syllable, affluent. Only affluent people can afford to eat exclusively organic produce. So we can talk about affluent people, an affluent country, affluent society, or the affluent suburbs, which means the outskirts outside a city. Often that's where a lot of the larger houses are and wealthy people move there. Or I could say affluent people move there. Do you think that affluent people should pay a higher proportion of their income in taxes? Yes, I do actually. Poorer people will need to keep a larger proportion of their income in order to make ends meet. However, once we've reached a certain level of income, we don't really need much more. It's very difficult to say what that amount is, so I think it's a good idea for income tax to be taxed in a staggered way. So the more you make, the higher proportion of tax that you pay. Let me show you some aspects of this answer. I start with my simple response. Yes, I do actually. Very nice short response, and then I elaborate on why. I say poorer people will need to keep a larger proportion of their income in order to make ends meet. So to make ends meet means to afford everything for day-to-day living. So you need to pay your bills, you need to provide food for you and your family, you need to pay a little bit towards your leisure activities as well. So that is to make ends meet, to be able to pay your bills, your mortgage, all of these things on time. So poorer people find it difficult to make ends meet. So this is a very useful idiom that you can use in the speaking test, and you could also use this idiom in the writing test. Even though we don't tend to use idioms as regularly in the writing test, this is the kind of idiom you certainly can use in the writing test. Here we talk about having tax in a staggered way, and that means that it's quite complex. It's like as you earn more, you're also taxed a higher percentage of your income. So you're taxed in a staggered way. Next word is to be in need. Now we also came across this earlier in the lesson. Can you remember what it means? I'll give you three options. It either means independent, requiring assistance, or poor, or very wealthy. Okay, it means this one. Someone who is in need is someone who requires money or some other type of help or assistance. So in need. It is the government's responsibility to help those in need. So we can be in need of something, in need of assistance, in need of money, or we can just be in need. So this is considered a high-level synonym for the word poor. So instead of saying poor people, we can say people in need. In a country, who has a responsibility to help people in need? Well, the government has a fundamental responsibility to help the citizens of their country who require assistance. They'll often do this through benefits like unemployment benefits and through support like subsidized housing. To be honest, I like to think that we all have a responsibility to help those in need, but I appreciate that individuals don't have the means to help others to the same extent as the government does. Okay, let's look at some of the vocabulary in this answer. We start with this large chunk of advanced language. A fundamental responsibility to help the citizens, or to help citizens, we could also say. So a fundamental responsibility means a basic responsibility. The government has a fundamental responsibility to look out for its citizens. So a basic responsibility, and a basic and important responsibility. Now we say require assistance. So this is a synonym of in need. People in need, people who require assistance. They'll often do this through benefits. So benefits are things like here, unemployment benefits or housing benefits, or maybe there will be benefits like food vouchers, which allow people to use these vouchers to go to a supermarket and receive discounted or free food. So these are different benefits, and we can also have subsidies, which is when the government pay a proportion of something. So if you have housing or subsidized housing, it means the government are paying for your housing. Okay, I like to think that. So this is another way to say that I think, so except it's something that makes you feel happy when you think about it. I like to think that. I like to think that everybody cares about the environment. It means you think it and it makes you happy to think that. It's something that you want to think. I like to think that you will learn a lot from this lesson, for example. Now we have this phrase again, to have the means to help others. So remember, if we have the means, it means we have the money, we have the ability, we have the ways to help someone, we have the tools perhaps. So if we don't have the means to help others, it means that we don't have the money or the ability or the tools to help someone adequately. So I'm saying that individuals don't have the means. We don't really, as individuals, have enough money to help everybody. But the government does have the means to help everybody in society, because they can raise taxes and they can provide unemployment benefits and subsidized housing. Okay, the next word is face. So this is a verb, and it means to deal with a difficult challenge or situation. So have you ever heard people saying to face a challenge or to face a difficulty? It means to be confronted and to overcome and to deal with that difficulty and challenge. So pronunciation, very simple, face, to face something, just one syllable. Governments are faced with the task of winning votes. So that's the challenge that they have. They need to win votes. So what difficulties do young graduates in your country face? So again, this could be a question that you get in part 3 of the speaking test, and here is how I would answer. At the moment, many young people in Britain face a very difficult and competitive job market. There aren't the same quantity of jobs that existed in the past. On top of that, we're facing a cost of living crisis, making it especially tricky to rent or buy a home. Inflation is growing and gas and electricity are also more expensive than ever before. All of these are tough obstacles for young people in Britain to overcome. Okay, so I want to point out this phrase, on top of that. So we're going to use on top of that when we have one reason or one idea, and then we want to introduce the next reason or the next idea. So you could say, firstly, da-da-da-da, on top of that, da-da-da-da. So on top of that is a bit like secondly. It's a way to introduce a new idea. We talk about a cost of living crisis. So this is a very common phrase that you hear a lot of the time in the United Kingdom, because we are experiencing a cost of living crisis as our electricity bills go up, as our gas bills go up, as our mortgage rates go up, which means we need more and more money just to live. So this is a cost of living crisis, the kind of collocation you can put into your speaking test or your writing test to get a higher IELTS score. We talk about obstacles and how we need to overcome those obstacles. So obstacles is a synonym for challenge, and overcome is this kind of synonym for to face challenges and to succeed in facing those challenges. The next word is to project an image of. So this is a very useful verb phrase, and it means to represent yourself in a particular way through your speech, behavior, and appearance. So this soldier or policeman below me, what kind of image does he project? So I'd say dressed all in black with his goggles and his massive gun, I'd say he projects an image of power and dominance and safety, perhaps. I hope. Okay, so project an image, or project an image of. Project an image of. Celebrities often try to project an image of being humanitarian. So we can have project an image of and then a noun, so things like project an image of importance, of power, of confidence. So when we use project an image of and then one of these nouns, we're showing a higher level of vocabulary. And guess what? That means a higher band score for your IELTS. So how do politicians attempt to project an image of competency and power? Well, For a start, I think politicians make a point of wearing smart clothes which show that they take their job seriously. Also, they'll often use words or phrases in their speeches to sound more powerful and in control. Phrases like create unity and it is imperative that. There's also quite a lot to say for body language as well. I remember watching a YouTube video a while ago that showed how politicians will always try to stand on the right of other political figures when they're shaking hands, as this is a way to appear more powerful. Okay, so we've got some useful vocabulary in this answer. We have things like take their job seriously. If you take something seriously, it means that you think it's important. So for example, I take my teaching seriously. I think it's important. I know lots of students that take their studies seriously, which means they think their studies are important. If you take somebody seriously, it means that you believe them and you're listening to them and you think that what they're saying is important. Okay, so take something seriously. We talk about body language. That's the way that you move your body. So I mentioned here that political figures, politicians, like to stand to the right when they shake hands with other political figures. And that's because when they're in this position with their hands up, can you see that? Maybe a little bit higher. Then they look stronger. But if they're standing on the left and they shake hands with somebody, they don't look as strong and they're seen as more vulnerable. So politicians pay attention to their body language to seem more confident and powerful. I learned that from YouTube. You can learn a lot from YouTube. Okay, political figures is just a synonym for politicians. Actually saying that, you could also be a politician, a political figure and not a politician. Maybe, for example, if you're in a different realm of politics. Right. Next one is draw attention to. So this is an idiom that you can use in the speaking test. You can also use it in the writing test. And it means to induce others to pay attention to someone or something. So draw attention to. Draw attention to. Celebrities can use their outreach to draw attention to important causes. Right. How can people draw attention to issues that they feel are especially important? Well, I guess that's one of the reasons why a lot of people protest. They feel strongly about an issue and protest to raise awareness about that particular topic. However, I guess there are other ways as well. People can write articles for magazines or newspapers. They can write blog posts, or even nowadays we can post on our social media channels to get the attention of people who follow us. Okay, let's look at some of the vocabulary I've used. First of all, I say they feel strongly about. So if you feel strongly about something, it's you think that that thing is important. You might be thinking, have we heard this already in this lesson? Yes, you have. We talked about people who feel strongly about the environment. That means they think the environment is important. We have people that feel strongly about animals. They think animals and animal rights are important. So feel strongly about something. We also have this, raise awareness about that particular topic. So raise awareness about something. Very useful vocabulary, which means to draw attention to something, to, how do I explain it? To encourage people to pay attention to something. So I'm trying to raise your awareness about different vocabulary and raise your awareness about different ways to answer tricky questions in IELTS. So I'm trying to draw your attention to these things. I'm trying to raise your awareness of these things or about these things. Here I talk about social media channels, so websites like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. These are social media channels, and people who follow us. So I'm sure you all know that on Facebook and Instagram you have people that are your friends and people that you can that can follow you to stay up to date with your latest posts and photos. Okay, at someone's disposal. So we have another idiom, and that means to be able to help or be used by someone. So all these people work in an office, and if you're the boss, they are at your disposal. They're all here to help you get the job done. Pronunciation, at someone's disposal. At someone's disposal. Okay. Individuals don't have the same resources that governments have at their disposal. So that's saying that individuals don't have the same objects, tools, people to help them as governments do. Governments have many more objects, tools, people to help them. They have more people at their disposal. Right. So should the government or individuals be responsible for the environment? So again, this is the kind of question you could get in task 2 of the writing test. So if you're studying for your IELTS writing test at the moment, just take a second and think, what would you say? What would you write down here? What are some ideas that you would put in your essay or in your speaking test? Here's what I would say. Can I say both? Certainly the government should be responsible for taking action to improve the environment, but individuals should do their part too. I guess one thing is that individuals don't have the same resources at their disposal. So we as individuals can recycle, we can choose not to buy certain products that we know are particularly harmful for the environment, but the government can do much, much more. They can make sizable investments in green energy or enact new legislation to change the way that businesses operate. All right, I want to point your attention to, or draw your attention to, this. Can I say both? Remember, a lot of the time you're asked your opinion in part 3, and maybe it's something that you've never thought about, and you can say, I'm not sure, and then have an answer. Or maybe you're given 2 options, and you can say, can I say both? So this is called a rhetorical question. I say it, and then I answer the question myself. So can I say both? Yes, and here's my answer. So can I say both? We also talk about how individuals can do their part too. It means they can also have an impact to play. We also have this phrase, don't have the same resources at their disposal, which is what we're learning in this lesson, which means they don't have the same ability, the same money, the same funds, the same people to help them. So individuals don't have the same resources at their disposal. The government has a lot more resources at their disposal. For example, they can make sizable investments. So sizable means very large, and investment means when you put money into a project or into an idea. It's a sizable investment, an important investment. We also have enact. So enact legislation or enact a new law means to create a new law. Next word is act in someone's best interest. So this is an idiom that means to act so as to benefit someone. Act in someone's best interest. It's important for the government to act in the best interest of the public. True. So act in the best interest of someone. Now, do you think the government always acts in the interest of its citizens, or acts in the best interest of its citizens? Well, I think a lot of corruption cases prove otherwise. Every week you hear of corruption scandals, bribes, or governmental figures employing friends and family members in positions of authority. In addition, my guess is that there are often decisions that the government makes that are beneficial for one group, but harmful for another. For example, if the government builds new homes, it can be great for people who want to buy their first home, but it may also affect house prices for people who already own their own home in the neighborhood. Also, by spending that money on building homes, it's not available for other areas, such as healthcare or education. Right, a very comprehensive answer here. So I said, well, I think a lot of corruption cases prove otherwise. So prove otherwise means show the contrary. So show the opposite. So do you think the government always acts in the interest of its citizens? Well, corruption cases prove otherwise. They show the opposite. They show that this is not true. And then we talk about corruption scandals and bribes. So a corruption scandal is like something that's going to be on the newspapers as being a big problem. And bribes is when you give somebody money in order to receive something. So for example, if you want Say a corrupt policeman is going to give you a parking ticket, and you say, hey, don't give me that parking ticket and I'll give you 50 quid right now. So £50 right now. So that's a bribe. You give someone money to change their behavior. Now we talk about people in positions of authority. So remember earlier we talked about people in need. We can also talk about people in positions of authority. So people in need means poor people and people who require assistance. People in positions of authority means people who have a lot of power and decision-making power. So the government are an example of people in positions of authority. Police have a lot of power. They are in positions of authority. Okay, we've got this word harmful, which means causing harm. And we've also got this, areas, for other areas such as healthcare or education. Now, a lot of the time in the IELTS test, you'll find questions like, should people spend money on healthcare? Should people spend money on the environment? Should the government spend money on providing cheap housing? And one argument that you can come up with whenever you see this kind of question is, well, yes, that's important, but what about other areas? So other areas like healthcare or education, which means what are some other uses of money that the government can prioritize? So this is a kind of general idea that appears and you can use regularly in the IELTS test. So yes, this thing is important, but there are other areas that are also important. Right, next phrase is means to do or means of doing something. So another idiom, but we can use this idiom in the speaking test and we can use it in the writing test as well. So this means the methods, the tools, or the ways to do something. The means to do something. The means of doing something. Individuals don't have the means to make significant changes to the environment without government action. So this sentence means that individuals don't have the power, they don't have the methods, they don't have the tools to make significant changes to the environment without government action. So it means the government do have the means to make changes. Right. Do you think that individuals have the means to enact meaningful changes to the environment? I could say this. But not alone, but through collective action, yes. If one person chooses to recycle, uses an electric car, or buys fewer goods, there will be a negligible difference made to the environment. However, if people collectively make changes to their lifestyle, there can be a much more dramatic effect in our efforts to improve the environment. Okay, so I talk about collective action. So that's when individuals act together. That is collective action. I also talk about a negligible difference, which means a very small difference. So imagine that one person starts recycling everything. Is that going to make a huge difference to the environment? No, not really. But if everybody collectively acts to recycle, will that make a large difference to the environment? Yes, it will. So negligible difference means a small difference. And then the opposite would be a sizable difference or a large difference. Now I say if people collectively, so if people together. All right, the next word we're going to look at is awareness. So knowledge and understanding of a particular activity or subject, for example. Pronunciation is awareness. Recent campaigns have led to dramatic increases in awareness of environmental issues. So we can increase awareness, we can develop awareness, and we can raise awareness. We can also talk about public awareness, environmental awareness, political awareness, or social awareness. And we also have the adjective form, which is aware. People are becoming far more aware of environmental issues. Right. How do you think the government can spread awareness about the importance of protecting the environment? Well, to begin with, they can do it through advertising campaigns. If they have a clear message that they want to spread, they can advertise on television, billboards, social media sites perhaps. Secondly, they can create better infrastructure for recycling waste and compost and provide clear information on how to use that infrastructure. This works rather successfully in Scotland. In Edinburgh, you can contact the local council to get free bins and composting equipment, and they'll ship it out to you. Okay, let me show you some of the vocabulary that I've used in this answer. Well, to begin with. So this is another discourse marker that we can use to introduce our first idea. Well, to begin with, da-da-da. Secondly, da-da-da. Thirdly, da-da-da. On top of that, da-da-da. Finally, da-da-da. So, well, to begin with is a way to introduce our ideas. Here we talk about a clear message that they want to spread. So to spread a message means to tell a lot of people or have a lot of people learn about this thing. A clear message that they want to spread. Billboards are like big signs that you see by the side of the road. So they can put these messages on billboards, like advertisements on billboards. And then I say, this works rather successfully in Scotland. So a good idea in IELTS speaking and also IELTS writing is to use your country or your city or your experiences as an example. So this works rather successfully in Scotland. And then I explain why this works well in Edinburgh, which is the capital city of Scotland. So in Edinburgh, you can contact the local council, so the people who look after your area, and they'll send you composting equipment. So composting equipment is like a small bin that you can put waste food in and then put that in another bin, and that's composted. It biodegrades into the environment. And I say that one of these bins can be shipped out to you. So this is a phrasal verb, means they send it to you in the post. Next, we've got volunteer. So to offer to do something that you do not have to do. So you don't have to do it, but you volunteer. You offer to do something. Okay, pronunciation, volunteer. Volunteer. So there's a verb form, but there are other forms of the word as well. We'll get to that in a second. Here's an example sentence. Many people volunteer their help during natural disasters. So we can volunteer information, we can volunteer help, we can volunteer to do something. And like I mentioned, there's different parts of speech. So we have the noun, volunteer. The charity relies on volunteers. So we can use volunteer as a verb. And we can talk about volunteers, the noun. And we can also use volunteer as an adjective. But volunteer work can distract students from studying. Okay, now do you think it's a good idea for young people to spend a year abroad after finishing high school? Well, let's see my answer. Yes, this is something that's pretty common in the UK, or at least it used to be when I was finishing high school. I knew a lot of people that spent a year abroad volunteering in schools or NGOs, and most of them had a very good experience. They came back to Scotland feeling like they had learned a lot and helped out in the countries that they had spent time in. I realise this is a bit of a luxury to be able to have a gap year, but it's possible. But if possible, it certainly sounds like a good idea. Right. So I say, having a gap year, spending a year abroad, that is something that is pretty common, or at least it used to be when I was finishing high school. So if you say something used to be, it means in the past it was very common. So I don't know about whether having a gap year is still popular, but when I was in school, it was very popular. It used to be very popular. We talk about volunteering abroad, and then you can volunteer for an NGO. So NGO stands for non-governmental organization. So a bit like a charity. It's a government an organization that's in a foreign country, or it may be in your country, that's not run by the government, but it makes an attempt to try and improve something about society. An NGO, non-governmental organization. And then I say, sounds like a good idea, which means I think it is a good idea. So a very informal phrase, but it's good for the speaking test. So if I say, for example, do you want to go for pizza tonight? You can say, sounds like a good idea, which means, yes, I would like to. Or, do you want to go and see that new Pedro Almodovar film? You can say, yes, it sounds like a good idea. It means, yes, I would love to. The next word is intern. So we looked at volunteers, now we're looking at interns. So an intern, or rather the verb to intern, is to work for a company for a short time and usually without being paid, which is a shame. So to intern, the stress is on the first syllable, to intern. Businesses often take on short-term interns to do menial tasks. So in this case, actually, intern is being used as a noun. So we can become an intern, take on an intern, bring in an intern, or work as an intern. We can be a new or an unpaid intern. And we also have an internship, so which is a noun form and describes the idea of being an intern. So an internship offers young people valuable work experience. For example, do you think interns should be paid? Again, this is the kind of question you could get in part 3 of the speaking test. So how would you answer it? This is what I would say. Certainly. I think a lot of companies exploit interns as a way to get cheap or even free labor. I think it would be much better if these companies were required by law to pay interns a fair amount. I imagine that it might mean that fewer internships would be given, but by and large, I think it would be better if interns were paid. So I start with certainly a short answer, and then I elaborate on my answer. I think a lot of companies exploit interns. So exploit is a way of saying they take advantage of these interns. They make them work very difficult and they don't give them any money. They exploit them. However, it would be much better if these companies were required by law. So this is a nice language chunk. To be required by law means the law says that something is important. It would be better if these companies were required by law to pay interns a fair amount. I've also got this phrase, by and large. By and large. It's very strange when you see it just by itself, but it's quite common in speaking, and it means kind of like on balance or in conclusion. So, but by and large, I think it would be better if interns were paid. So, but in conclusion, but ultimately, I think it would be better if interns were paid. By and large. Okay, the next word is activist. You can see these activists below. They want more English pro tips. So what is an activist? An activist is a person who believes in political change and takes part in activities to make this happen. Activist. Stress on the first syllable, activist. Animal rights activists point out that many pharmaceutical companies still test on animals. Okay, so we can have an animal rights activist, an environmental activist, a political activist, a student activist. Right, why do you think there has been a rise in social media activists? Well, I guess social media is still relatively new. People are still exploring the ways in which it can be used. One of the ways that more and more people have started to use social media is to project their voice, beliefs, and opinions to a larger audience. In the past, if we had something that we felt strongly about, we might find it difficult or hard to reach a large audience who would be willing to listen. However, nowadays we can spread our views through social media and reach a much larger audience of like-minded people. Okay, so I say, well, I guess social media is still relatively new. Relatively new means quite new, not brand new, but quite new. Relatively new. Often when we use words like relatively cheap or relatively new, the use of those adverbs increases our IELTS score. So we can say, well, social media is relatively new. Buying a car is relatively expensive. The IELTS test is relatively hard. So relatively and then the adjective. Next we have project their voice, beliefs and opinions to a larger audience. Okay, so to project your voice means to, how do I describe that? It's when so if you write on social media, or if you speak quietly, then nobody can hear you. But if you project your voice, then lots of people can hear you. And it's the same on social media. We say that we can project our voice. We're not speaking louder, but more people can hear or see our opinions. So we project our voice or our beliefs or our opinions through social media and then we can reach a larger audience. So project our voice. We're not actually speaking louder, but through using these tools like social media, we're reaching a larger audience. So we are projecting our voice. Oh, we also have this, reach a larger audience, which means to be heard by a larger audience. And then we say we can be heard by more like-minded people. So this means people who think in the same way as us, like-minded people. Right, not too many words left. One of them is biased, which is an adjective meaning to show an unreasonable preference or dislike. So biased. People worry that newspapers can be biased in favour of one political party. So we can be heavily biased or unconsciously biased, and then we've got lots of different collocations. We also have a noun form. So reporters must be impartial and not show political bias. Right, how can bosses avoid being biased at work? Oof. Well, I'd say that this is something that is difficult but very important to do. I think it takes a lot of reflection and self-discipline. It's natural to have favourites. We have favourite friends, family members, and qualities in people that we like. However, in the workplace, it's important to remain impartial. Maybe one of the simplest things bosses can do is to always keep a professional distance between them and the people they manage. As long as there is professional distance, it's much easier to remain neutral and fair towards the people that you manage. Okay, so I say it's difficult but very important to do. Okay, useful phrase. I don't really know what I'm going to tell you about that. I guess it's a nice way to introduce the topic. It's a difficult but important thing to do. It requires reflection and self-discipline. So reflection is the practice of thinking about something that you've done or something that you've said or a way that you've acted. So reflecting on that. So to not be biased at work requires you to do a lot of reflection. It takes a lot of reflection, and it also takes self-discipline. You have to be in control of the way that you act. Now, this is important so that you can remain impartial. So remain impartial means remain neutral. You don't have any favorites. A good way to do this is to keep a professional distance. So you don't become best friends with all the people you work with. You keep a professional distance. You are the manager, they are the employee, and you're not best friends. You have a clear relationship where you are the boss and they are the workers. And this helps you to remain neutral. So remain impartial or remain neutral are synonyms, and it means not to become too close. Right, and not to have favorites. The next is to be responsible for something. So having an obligation to do something or having control over or care for someone as part of one's job or role. So responsible. Now, parents should be responsible for making sure that children arrive on time and are well equipped for school. So we can be responsible for something like the environment, others, children, the elderly, and we have the noun form responsibility. Politicians often take credit for successes and avoid responsibility for failures. That's true. Who should be responsible for making sure that children complete their homework? Again, typical part 3 question. Well, I guess that responsibility falls on the parents. Parents need to ensure that their children have completed any homework that the teachers set. Parents should also be responsible for making sure that their children arrive on time and are well equipped for school. Right, responsibility falls on the parents. So if something falls on the parents, like responsibility, it means it is the parents' responsibility. It is something that they need to do. I also have this phrase, ensure. So that's an advanced way to say to make sure or to make certain. Parents need to ensure that children have completed their homework, which is parents need to make sure or make certain that children have completed their homework. Right, my goodness, I believe that's the end of this lesson. It's certainly been a long lesson, but I hope these 20 advanced words and phrases will help you in both the speaking test and the writing test. And especially when you get those tricky essays in task 2 of the writing test that talk about whose responsibility something is. Is it an individual's responsibility? Is it the government's responsibility? Is it the company's responsibility? After this lesson, you're going to have a lot of useful vocabulary to impress the examiner and to write about this in a more clear and concise way. Best of luck with all of your studies, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye then.